I'm Brian Hyatt. This is Rolling Stone Music Now. There's a great new HBO documentary you can watch now on Max called Stevie Van Zandt, Disciple. It's about the really wild life of little Stevie Van Zandt, who is, of course, the guitarist in the E Street Band, but has also done a lot of other stuff in his career. He was on The Sopranos. He was the producer, songwriter, and even manager behind the great 70s albums by Southside Johnny and the Asbury Jukes. Steve made some great albums on his own in the 80s with his band, The Disciples of Soul. He also was a political activist, a major force in the fight against apartheid in South Africa. He helped spearhead the 1985 all-star song Sun City, which was a major moment in that battle. On top of all that, in more recent years, Steve has also been a sort of evangelist for the history of rock and soul. He's championed garage rock through the Underground Garage, his Sirius XM station, and he also has a program called Teach Rock that puts the history of music in schools. I recently sat down to talk with Steve and Bill Teck, who is the director of the movie. And here is that interview. So, Bill, why did you want to make a movie about someone who's lived 20 lives and try to make it into just one movie?
Growing up in Miami, there was a music writer named John Marlowe. He wrote the Miami News, and he would write about Stevie all the time. Yeah, I was a young, impressionable kid, and he was like, Stevie Van Zandt's the new Bob Dylan. Little Steven is the most important artist. I got into his music early, 13, 14. And when I became a filmmaker, I started trying to do this doc. And I reached out to him in 2006, in 2010, in 2014, and he just finally got him to acquiesce in 2018 when we started working on this. But I felt like I knew this, that Silvio Dante had helped end apartheid and free Nelson Mandela, but I felt like people knew Stevie from some things, but no one really knew how vast the work was, how many things he'd been involved in. And I was interested in telling that story.
Steve, it feels like you really let Bill just do his thing here.
Yeah, I wasn't involved at all. I felt two ways about it. I was honored and grateful that someone was interested in telling the story. I'm proud of the work I've done. But at the same time, personally, I'm not that crazy about being the center of attention. I'm really not comfortable with that. I had mixed feelings about the whole thing. But in the end, when Bill really convinced me that it really is going to be about the work more than about me, basically, I didn't even want to be in it. Still haven't seen the movie.
He wasn't in the first couple cuts of the movie. And he would get me podcasts and file footage. And I'm like, Stevie, please sit for me, please.
Yeah, I could tell it was recent interview footage. It must have been the last thing you did, practically.
Pretty much. Yeah, it took a lot of cajoling and convincing. Because he's a rock star. You'd think he would be a little more amenable to being on camera. But he's a very unique rock star. And I think not just the rock and roll, but all the work, I just wanted to highlight that. And tell the story, the love story with Maureen, his love affair with rock and roll music and keeping it alive, his friendship with Springsteen. That's a very beautiful story of friendship we try to tell. And then I had the privilege to expose, hey, this guy did the first streaming show on Netflix. This guy did the first branded satellite radio station. I don't think people know all the work.
Bill, like I said at the beginning, one of the things this movie reminds you of is that Steve has done an impossible number of things in his life.
I don't know. I don't think he sleeps. I don't think the guy sleeps. I don't know how he does it because he just keeps adding on. And most rock and roll documentaries, 90 minutes, very detailed on how the band was created. And then then they got signed. They had some hits. They broke up. They still toured. They hate each other, but they're out there. That's every rock doc. And this is a little bit more in depth. And I tell people, it's just a complicated life. It's almost like if Berry Gordy had prevented JFK's assassination. That's a lot of stuff.
I knew he had a challenge on his hands just from writing the book. Writing the book was challenging for me. And for the first time, I really looked back on my life and really analyzed it, which I'd never done. And I found there were some interesting things in there that I found that relieved some of my guilt and my sort of regrets, that I had. I understood them in a whole new way. Helped me out as far as my own peace of mind. It was certainly a challenge to put all this stuff into a coherent story. And I joke to Bill, I can't wait to see this because I hope you can explain my life to me, because I got a little bit of that from the book, but it's still a pretty wild life, a little bit hard to make sense of. From what I'm hearing from people, he managed to do it somehow. So
you lived a life. I just had to just not mess it up.
One of the other things I realized watching this movie is that, Steve, you have this evangelical instinct, I can only call it. And in the 80s, you started to put that towards politics with this incredible fervor. And the movie reminds us how long that went on and how much you did and how hard you were hitting it every night playing those political songs. And then later you ended up transferring that energy into a sort of rock and roll evangelism, trying to preserve rock and roll. It does feel like the same crusade, the same energy to me.
You're totally right. That's exactly what happened. I think the interesting sort of moment there, the motivating factor was once I realized, once I left the E Street Band and then it's sunk in that, oh my God, I spent 15 years trying to make it. And we just made it. And I walked away. And I really felt like I had ended my life at that point. So when you realize that you're now on this path and you look back and the bridge, you just burned the bridge, okay? There's no way back now, okay? You are committed to this politics thing even more than you maybe intended. That's that energy you're talking about in the 80s. It was really sparked with South Africa. It went from artist, journalist to artist, journalist, activist at that point. The political stuff was the benefit of that energy of, okay, I got no way back. Career stuff is over. Music is over. Me ever being successful is over in terms of financial independence. All that wonderful dream, part of that wonderful dream growing up, that's all over. So I got nowhere to go but forward here. Get into the jungle, man. Let's go. And let's see if we can justify our existence somehow to make up for everything we just lost. And then that played itself out. And then whatever it was, 7, 8, 9, 10 years later, I realized, wow, I turned the radio on one day and I realized rock and roll is an endangered species. And the greatest music ever made is no longer accessible to future generations. And I'm like, that's not right. That's not right. I mean, it's bad enough we had all the fun. Right? My generation had all the fun, okay? We had sex before AIDS. We had the greatest music ever made all the time. Every month a new artist would pop out of the woodwork and be amazing. I was one big party and I'm like, man, we got to fix this because this future generations need to have access to this stuff. So I took all that political energy and moved it into making sure that rock and roll and really rock and soul would survive and maybe never thrive again, but certainly be accessible. And then Sirius Satellite came along. This is the right time. That's a lot of my life. A lot of my life, this happens by circumstance. I can't take credit for a lot of it, honestly. Just like I'm wandering through the wilderness and I'm doing this and I'm doing that and following my instincts, and then things help out. David Chase happens to see me on TV, inducting the Rascals, and, my friend Scott Greenstein happens to get a consulting job on this new thing called Sirius Satellite. Ted Sarandos happens to start this new thing called Netflix, which happens to be across the street from where my first meeting was. I realized we couldn't afford to shoot the show that we wrote called Lilyhammer. I come out of one meeting and there's Netflix across the street. How am I supposed to take credit for this stuff? I mean, really, it's just bizarre. So I was like, good luck making sense out of this, Billy, because I'm sorry. It's just like one strange adventure.
In the film, your wife, Maureen, says that she was worried about you during your foreign adventures during that political period. And I think maybe even a bit resentful because she felt like you were risking everything, risking your life, risking your career. And it does make me think, mixed in with that evangelical, charitable, benevolent instinct, was a bit of self-destructive feelings at that point.
No doubt. No, forget about that benevolence and charity stuff. That was not part of the picture. I'm sorry. I was obsessed. It was an obsession. It wasn't, I'm doing nice things for people. I'm not a nice guy. Okay? I'm really not. All right? I'm doing things that, things that I have to do. You know what I mean? I'm doing it because I'm obsessed to do it. I was embarrassed about our South African policy. Once I realized I was an American, which is a whole nother story, which came to me very late in life.
Yeah, you have that great line like, American? I'm from New Jersey.
You know what I mean? Because I never thought about the obligations or responsibilities of being an American. But once I realized that, I'm like, oh my God, we're endorsing slavery? It's embarrassing. I got to fix this. You know what I mean? Not to be nice to anybody, not to be benevolent, but it was just an embarrassment. I'm attracted to those gaps. I'm attracted to injustice. And I just feel like it needs to be fixed. I wonder why somebody else isn't fixing it. I guess maybe I got to fix it. I don't know. You know what I mean? There's no plan to it. There's no logic necessarily to it. I just run into a problem and I say, hey, if I can fix it, I'm going to try and fix it. It's not a benevolent, philanthropic thing with me. It's really not.
Where did this self-destruction come in?
Like I said, I on the flight to South Africa, I realized I ended my life. I just killed myself. 15 years of work, man. And I leave the day before payday. Are you fucking nuts?
And you're talking about the fact that you had left the E Street Band just before Born in the USA came out, just before the big success, just before the stadium tours after all those years of work.
And I just was like, whoa, that was a mistake, you know? And already there was no going back. So I became a bit suicidal at that point, which was very helpful. It didn't help my marriage, maybe, but it put me in a situation where I could talk to the Zanian People's Organization and tough characters to accomplish what I felt needed to be accomplished instead of being scared about it or fearful for my life, which anybody logical and reasonable would have been. I didn't care. Take that machete out and cut my head off. I don't give a shit. You know what I mean? Do me a favor. At that point, I was like, you want to kill me? You're doing me a favor. So I wasn't the least bit afraid. And I think that came from that suicidal impulse that I had ended my life and then done such a stupid thing. But somehow you hang in there and destiny shows that you're not done yet. There's some other things in mind. And that's what makes the whole second act, as Bill calls it, more interesting.
We've learned a little bit more about Steve's split from the E Street Band. We know more about it than we used to because it was in Bruce's book. There was Steve's book. Bill, what were you trying to find out about that moment of Steve leaving the E Street Band? And what do you feel like you learned that you didn't know?
I'm a huge, obviously, Stevie fan and a huge Springsteen fan. So growing up, I was at the Born in the USA tour, and the entrance music, when the crowd's coming in, was Voice of America. And every night he'd play No Surrender and dedicated to little Steven and say, you should get Voice of America. It's a great album. And so when I found out that perhaps it was a little more acrimony, and I had told Steve, I'm going to tell the truth here. And then reading Stevie's book and Bruce's book, I was like, oh, okay, good. They explored a little bit more. And I was able to, I was tickled that John Landau and everybody felt more comfortable telling us how that split happened. It's, so often when you see these docs, it's like the acrimony and everybody's mad. And it was beautiful to see the brotherhood, even when they were separated, that these guys just had this love for each other. And that was one of the many threads we had to weave into the story. And I'm moved that it's even in the movie.
I knew Eddie Vedder was a fan, but I didn't know how closely he followed every move of Steve's career, which we learn in this movie. In the film, Ed has this line that I love. It basically says, I love Nils Lofgren, but when I first saw him on stage with the E Street Band, it was like having a new stepdad, and you have to get used to the new stepdad, quote, fucking your mom.
He did say that, and I hope it goes over okay. He had been waiting his whole life to talk about Steve Van Zandt. As a fan, I would read in Rolling Stone, Eddie Vedder played a benefit concert and covered Stevie Van Zandt's I'm a Patriot. I'm like, whoa, wait, what? I loved Pearl Jam, but wait a minute, he's a Stevie fan too? So I knew that. And when I got to there to do the interview, you could tell that maybe his contemporaries, that whole scene, those are not people that maybe knew E Street's music. I don't imagine. I feel like he did, and maybe Pearl Jam did, but not the rest of that scene. And all of a sudden, this dude shows up to talk Stevie, and he was like, I've been waiting my whole life. We stayed up all night listening to his music, to Stevie's music.
We also just celebrated the 40th anniversary of Born in the USA. And, Steve, you left during the making of that album, but 8 of the tracks you played on, you co-produced, you were deeply involved with that album. But how did your vision for that album differ from anyone else's?
We had made the major change that took place on the river, the album before that. We were having a hell of a time capturing the live. We had a reputation as one of the best live bands. couldn't get it on record. It took literally 5 albums. And finally, Bruce came to me and said, listen, you got to produce this album with me because you're a band guy and we got to make this thing sound like the band. So the big breakthrough was On the River. I found the right studio. I found the right engineer. We had the right arrangements with the right songs. Bruce started writing like a maniac and he had already broken loose with the songwriting on Darkness. He went from like writing 8.5 songs for Born to Run to 60 songs for Darkness, and then another 60 for River. And they're all good. They're all good. So that the major breakthrough happened there. Then Born USA, for some reason, no reason really, we decided let's take it one step further and be totally live in the studio. For those 8 songs, when Bruce wanted to sing the song again, we played it again. It was just nutty. There's no reason to do that other than just, let's see if we can do it. So the remarkable thing is when 7 of those songs became top 10 hits, if you listen back to them now, it's insane. They have nothing to do with what's going on in the rest of the charts. It was just our time. It was just our moment. And to have 7 hits and they're crazy hits and they're live in the studio hits, most of them. For the solo and Glory Days, I picked the mandolin off the chair and played it into my vocal mic. There's silly things like that, which you don't have to do. This is not 1959. We just decided to do that just for the fun of it. And then we ended up keeping it for the most part.
What was the difference specifically? Because John Landau in the documentary says that you guys started to have different ideas. John said that Bruce was leaning John's way. What did it come down to, if you remember?
It's funny when I look back, and I mentioned this to Bill, I'm not sure what ends up in the movie or what, but when I look back, I don't remember disagreeing that much, particularly with John Landau. I think we had much more in common than differences. And I thought about this even when I wrote the book.
Yeah.
I can't remember what the disagreements really were. Maybe Bill found some, but I couldn't really remember any, to tell you the truth. I mean, we have such common taste. I don't know. I just think at a certain point, I think the discussion about having a hit single, maybe.
Yeah.
But I was into it also. I mean, I spent all week on Darkness arranging Because the Night, okay? Thinking it was going to be our first hit single.
It was somebody's first hit single, yeah.
But then I was very conscious of making sure Hungry Heart got recorded because I felt that then that could be our first hit single, which it turned out to be. So I was conscious of needing a hit single at that point also. It wasn't exactly that. I don't know. Did you find out?
And as you well know, they started recording all these songs before Nebraska. And I keep track of how many songs they recorded before Nebraska. And they got all these songs. And then I guess among the crew, that let's just release this tape that I've been carrying around in my pocket without a case. And they released that, which I think you encouraged them to do.
Yeah, I was the first one to hear it. We had written it as a demo, recorded it as a demo, which made it the most intimate record he would ever make because he had no intention of releasing it. I just said, this is not a demo. This is an absolute amazing piece of art that needs to come out. And he didn't believe me at first. It took him months to really decide to do it. But I knew it right away when I heard it, that this was an extraordinary album that needed to come out. But anyway, it was ostensibly the demos for what became Born in the USA.
Yeah.
Right.
And then I feel like maybe Stevie he was making his first solo record. He's touring Europe. And Pat Thrall, who is guitar player on the later tours, addressed a little bit. I think he was feeling, holy shit, this is what being a solo artist is. Meanwhile, go back home to the day job and they're still recording songs. Is Bruce going to turn inward like Dylan did and not put this record out and go in another direction? And I think I wasn't there and no one, I tried, but maybe it was like time for me to take that extra step and get really political. And then they wind up finishing the record. That's what I think maybe happened.
Ultimately, you said the actual split wasn't over the record. It was over, you sort of wanted an official position of decision-making responsibility and didn't get that.
No, there was some of that at that point. I did feel that consigliere role, which was part of being somebody's best friend. Now there was a new guy also giving advice. And again, I don't particularly remember disagreeing on anything, but we must have. But I just felt I wanted to be part of that decision-making process. And I think John, as official manager, now felt that was his world. I think there was just a natural conflict there in terms of whose advice is going to be relevant. I had taken the lead more or less with the musical advice. And I think John felt that the business advice was his domain. That's about as close as I can get to it, I think. And I just felt it was all one thing. I just felt it was really all one thing. And the business started to become a little bit more distant from my involvement. And I think that was part of it. I just felt at the time things are going to get a little weird. So to preserve the friendship, I think it's best that I split. And that's what happened. And it worked. We did preserve the friendship. And before things really got serious and got ugly.
As an observer, I was thrilled because we got Voice of America and Born in the USA. And then I don't think we would have had Sun City.
The Sun City part of the documentary could really be its own documentary. It works very well on its own. I don't know if young people know about it to the extent they should, that it was the cool We Are the World that really had an impact on the world. This stunning lineup, you have two of the toughest people in music, Lou Reed and Miles Davis, and they're both so unguarded and so happy to be there.
Yeah. Again, right timing, good timing. We did it, I think, for the right reasons and the right way. We didn't care about people's celebrity. And I always have to say, there was four of us equally important. Danny Schechter, who was one of the first guys I contacted, who really helped Arthur Baker. It was his phone book and it's his studio. And Hart Perry filmed it, or else nobody would have ever heard it because American radio wouldn't play it. It was only MTV and BET was the only way people heard it. Four of us sat down to say, okay, who do we want on this? We wanted people who had expressed something in their works. They'd done something. And of course, so right at the top of the list was Gil Scott-Heron, who had the very first song about South Africa called Johannesburg. Second was Peter Gabriel with Biko, which is how I got into the whole subject. And third for me was Miles Davis, just because he had just lived this life of fighting against oppression himself. And I thought, there's a real American connection to all of this. This is not just happening in South Africa, although it's the extreme version of it. First of all, they did what they did in South Africa, learning from what we did to our American Indian, for starters, okay? This whole homeland policy was based on our Indian reservations. But on top of that, of course, we were still a very racist country ourselves. Guy beat up Miles Davis outside his own gig, a cop. And so Miles had been fighting his whole life, and he said how many times he gets stopped. He's driving around a Ferrari or whatever his car was, and it gets stopped every hour. Anyway, so we made a list of people that we felt were saying something with their work or were particularly important. That's how we got Peter Garrett from Midnight Oil. Nobody had ever heard of Midnight Oil at that point. Big Youth from Jamaica. Of course, Jimmy Cliff. Ruben Blades, people didn't know that much about. Ray Barretto. These are people that were engaged in various types of liberation activities, political activities. We did it for the right reasons with the right list of people. Now, so a lot of whom became famous, but we didn't care about the celebrity factor at all. Even Hall & Oates had refused to play Sun City. They were actively engaged in the issue. Ringo Starr, the Beatles refused to play, it was before Sun City, they refused to play South Africa because it was segregated audiences. So everybody on that record had some direct engagement to some kind of political issue. And so in the end, it turned out to be a more righteous project for that reason, just based on that rather than celebrity.
And it's really important to note that you had rappers on Sun City in 1985, which was really forward-looking at the time and really puts you on the right side of history.
Yeah, that was big because the industry was trying to snuff it out in its infancy. People don't realize that now. They probably deny it if you ask them. But I was questioned at the time. You're putting Melly Mel next to Jackson Browne, next to, Bob Dylan. I was like, yeah, I feel that strongly about this new thing called rap. For the first time, Black artists are getting a chance to express themselves without having to go to war like Marvin Gaye did with Berry Gordy, who had to fight to put out what's going on. That was a year-long fight. And so suddenly, Black artists are actually expressing themselves. I thought this is monumentally important, and we're going to support it. So it was a big deal at the time, and we were happy to be ahead of the curve that way and got them all on MTV on top of that, which was miraculous.
People don't remember. It was pre-Walk This Way. I had never heard a record like that mixed that many genres and styles. George Clinton, The Temptations, and you have Pat Benatar, Bruce. Everybody's And as Darlene Love says, and you haven't seen this yet, but she says everybody came together. It was just cohesive. That speaks to what a great arranger and producer he is. But there's an energy captured in that. The footage that Art Perry shot, the video that Jonathan Demme and Godley and Cream directed.
Big.
It's pure energy.
We needed to not just say, let's feed people in Africa. We needed to motivate people. That's what that energy was for. We need to move forward with this thing. We wanted to pretend that this was a vast movement that was going somewhere, even though we were inventing it. And Jonathan Demme understood that. I'm like, I want this to feel like a success, even though nobody knows anything we're talking about here. Let's act like they soon will. And it wasn't just, this is what's happening. It's we need to actually be actively changing something. So it needed that energy to go forward.
I've always loved Steve's work with Southside Johnny and the Jukes, and I was really grateful that all of that made it into the movie. From his 70s work and even the Better Days comeback album. Bill, it seems like it must have been important to you personally to get that stuff in there.
Those are some of my favorite songs of all time because I love those Southside records as much as I love his solo records, as much as I love some East Street Band records. And I thought with that, we got to have a little mini Southside Johnny doc in the middle of this movie. And there's so many little mini docs. We're going to stop and explain what it was like when the Beatles came and Frank Barcelona, all the things that informed Stevie and inform his work. So the mixture of like a very well-known artist and maybe a not as well-known artist, all those things. And Southside is certainly well-known. And for Southside Johnny fans and fans of that branch of what Stevie does, because he does a lot of different things, I thought we got to make this work. And I was so grateful to have footage. Tom Zimney, who directs a lot of stuff, Street Band and Springsteen, he slipped me that piece of footage of Stevie, Southside, and Bruce at the Pony that I've never seen. I think no one's ever seen. And he's like, can you use this? And I was like, thank you, Tom. Just that great Bob Gruen footage outside the Pony on the radio broadcast. East Coast people know, but I think a lot of people are going to get turned on to some very groovy, horn-driven music that needs to be more widely heard.
Steve, you went really far afield in your 80s adventures, reggae, hip-hop influences, dance. You went really far from that Jersey soul sound you were known for. And not long after all that, you went back and seemingly seamlessly slipped back into that mode and wrote for Southside on Better Days. Was it seamless, or did you have to remind yourself of where you came from?
No, I was a little concerned because the third record we had done, Hearts of Stone, had received such accolades. Always on everybody's best of albums of the decade, the century. I was a little concerned. Can I equal that? Can I equal or beat that? First of all, before I agreed to do it, I said, let me see if I can write something and what I come up with. And I came up with Coming Back. I thought maybe I can do this, and then had the idea to make it a real reunion, get Bruce involved. We even got the Bon Jovi involved, who had been a fan, and decided to write a song about those days that sums up our relationship. Got lonely and that turned out to be a really significant, I think, moment when I thought, well, this is worthwhile now. After I got a couple of songs written that felt, okay, I think this is at that quality level that we need if we're going to do a comeback. As far as the horn thing, yeah, it was there. I didn't have to reach very far for that. You know what I mean? Those things don't go away. Your interest just goes elsewhere, but it's still there.
Steve, in recent years, you revived the Disciples of Soul, did a couple of great albums, did some tours that I really enjoyed. But I know it didn't come cheap with a band that big. Are you going to be able to do some stuff going forward? Are you going to find a way to play some more shows, make another soul record?
No, I don't know. I don't think so. Not unless I win the lottery or Bill hits oil in his backyard. I'm still paying for those tours. And I just felt I needed to do it because it was closing the circle a little bit. It's one of the greatest bands in the world. It's very expensive. Well, unless I find a patron at some point, it's unlikely that that'll ever happen again. I got to say, it's almost impossible.
I'm hoping that when people see the movie and when Stevie sees it, he'll be like, you know what? Maybe we'll do this one more time. I saw those tours too. They're amazing.
Yeah, I'm almost out of debt. It's time to get back in debt a little bit. It's time to remortgage the house again.
Steve, I've been able to see you a couple times with Bruce and the E Street Band on this tour, and you're obviously in great shape. You lost a bunch of weight. The moment I first saw you on stage, you looked like you had twice as much energy as before. It just seems like you're really feeling good.
Yeah, it was a long journey mentally, maybe spiritually, back to that place. Because once I became an actor, that dominated up until a year ago. Yeah, I came back. I thought music is over. My life now is being an actor, and I intended to be a writer and director and everything that went with that, which I managed to do on Lilyhammer. But that was my future. I had done the rock star thing. Thank you. Nice. Now I'm moving on. So then he puts the band back together, and I come back halfway and stayed there, really, up until literally a year and a half, 2 years ago, when Bruce does the Letter to You album. And it was a remarkable album that really didn't get the recognition it deserved. It's an absolutely incredible record that for somebody to write at this stage of the game. Okay. And then got delayed, I guess, with the whole COVID thing. And then, okay, so now we're going to come back, and it's going to be 7 years after our previous tour, right? And I'm thinking to myself, this could be the last tour. I'm going to be a rock star one more time. There's no acting jobs in the sight at the moment anyway, but mentally, I got enough of the, you're never going to stop learning. I understand enough about the acting thing right now that I don't need the extra crutch, which was a big help changing myself physically, a huge help as a first-time actor. So I don't need that anymore so much. And I really feel like let's surprise everybody, because they're not going to know what to expect, man. Okay, and as loyal as our audience is, and it's the best audience in the world, as just proven by us postponing Marseille, Prague, and Milan. And do they get pissed off? No, they go to the town square, tens of thousands of them, and sing Bruce Springsteen songs for 4 hours. How remarkable of an audience is that, right? So I'm like, I'm sure they don't know what to expect, man. Is it going to be like a bunch of old men coming back and going through the motions? And I'm like, no way, man. I'm like, we're going to come back and blow minds. All right. And the album I knew was going to be the theme of the tour, which was mortality. And I'm like, we got to balance mortality with vitality. All right. Yeah, we're closer to the end than we are to the beginning, but we ain't going out quietly, baby. We ain't crawling out of here. Okay. And so I had that in my mind, and I lost 100 pounds in 6 months. And I said, I want to be a rock star one more time. Okay. And I hadn't felt like that in a long time, man. Long time. 30 years at least. But mentally, I got myself back into being, let's honor our audience's loyalty. Let's honor Bruce Springsteen's incredible writing and the E Street Band's hard work. Let's honor that by showing respect and getting in shape for this one.
And you guys are playing Asbury Park in September. I just wanted to make a personal plea to try to get Southside up there and do It's Been a Long Time on that stage.
It'll be brought up at the next board meeting.
Perfect. Thank you. Bill, it was great to meet you. Steve, great to see you. Congrats on the film.
I've been following your writing, so this is a thrill. Thank you.
And that's our show. We'll be back next week. In the meantime, subscribe to Rolling Stone Music Now, wherever you get your podcasts. And please leave us 5 stars and a nice review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, because that's always appreciated. But as always, thanks so much for listening, and we will see you next week.